This Sunday marks the last Sunday in the theme of sacred longings, a messenger of truth. And today we're going to talk about no enlightened retirement. It's kind of self-explanatory, I think. It means the journey never stops. And it means you never get anywhere, especially when you think you deserve to get somewhere, when you've worked so hard and efforted so long and done spiritual practice and walked on the path as a good human being for so long with such great intention, with a soul that wants to do good and love everyone and give the shirt off your back. No, there is no enlightened retirement. We're going to talk about that today, drawing from a few of the different traditions and the process or the path as they describe it. We'll probably find ourselves find the different paths very familiar to us. Now, I was listening to just before Quirks and Quarks on CBC, maybe yesterday. I love Quirks and Quarks. I'm just so fascinated. I mean, they're talking about this salamander that was, lived 231 billion years ago, that was the size of a car. And they also said the strongest species are the ones that go extinct first. Isn't that interesting? I would have thought it would be the reverse. But you'll have to Google cbc.com for repeat of that show on that one. But one of the things they said before the program came on was, you know that saying, he who has technology at your fingertips will have the world in the palm of your hand. Well, they're talking about technology, of course, and a glove, that you can wear a glove and you can phone through the glove. You can talk to your glove, talk to the hand. You know this? Talk to the glove, and you can even put your finger up like this and press your palm and it will take your picture. I mean, really. So I'm listening going, I don't even know how to be in this world, Then they were talking about, the next thing was, if you have a hamster and your hamster is not happy in that certain kind of way, there's a pill and it starts with V. For hamsters. And I'm thinking, all right, I've heard everything now until I heard the edible pizza box. They are making, because apparently surveys show, you're wondering what this has to do with Palm Sunday, I'm sure, but I will always connect it. The surveys show that people love to eat the crusts of the pizza. And once they've done the pizza, they want more crust. So they've made the pizza box out of dough. A crusty dough, which of course is, ecologically a very sound idea, and of course they can charge a little more for the pizza because now you're eating the box. So I'm listening to all of this stuff on the radio, and I'm thinking, now I'm going to have to talk about sacred longings. And what has this got to do with anything? Well, here's what it's got to do with it in my perspective. We have gone through many cultures. One of the cultures that we have gone through is the age of empowerment. The age of empowerment, where people started through the Declaration of Freedom years and years ago, where people started to know that they could be responsible for their own process, their own progress, their own success. Then we went through the age of knowledge. Knowledge was power. And now we are at the age of transcendence. Now, transcendence means complete openness of mind. Yes, freedom of thought, but openness of mind. Being open, as Dr. Ernest Holmes said, open at the top. So when I listen to things like that on the radio that boggle my mind, I just let it put a smile on my face because I am open at the top. And we are about evolution, and we are about conscious evolution, about knowing and being mindful and watching and observing, as well as bringing ourselves fully into the process of our own evolution, but watching that evolution and being open when we see what we see, hear what we hear, and experience what we experience. I think we're standing as a culture, as a humanity, quite at a precarious point in this age of transcendence. The physicists call it a bifurcation point. I know, you're going to say, what does that mean? Well, bifurcation is that process between the poles of death and birth, right? It's really about rebirth. Not birth and death, but death and birth. The death of the old culture, the age of knowledge, empowerment that have brought us to the emergence of the age of transcendence. Now that's culturally speaking, but it's also true for us because we make up the culture. We carry the culture. Right? So we each are at the place of transcendence in our own lives. And I don't know about you, but definitely bifurcation is going on in my life. I am rebirthing. It's where you don't really know where you are anymore, where you can't really recognize too many things, and often you've lost your taste for what you thought you liked. You know? You're in that, you could call it the mystery, you could call it the void, you could call it on a bridge, wonderful symbology, crossing the bridge. You could call it the glorious entry into Jerusalem. And we know what happened a week later. And that's what happens. There is no enlightenment or enlightened retirement because we are always moving towards the crossroads in our own rebirth. Always. It's kind of like we're emerging from a fetal state. And there seems to be less and less ability to identify the time-space boundaries. Is that true for you? And I've said this many times. Gary Zukav wrote this in The Seed of the Soul, one of my most favorite sentences. Some of you who've heard me speak for years will probably know what I'm going to say. Isn't it wonderful to think that we could live this life consciously where our soul leads off, our personality begins? So there is no boundary. There is no delineation between how we show up in the world and live and express fully through the sacred longings of our soul and how we communicate in the physical or material reality of this world in order to get our needs met. The bifurcation point, right? The bifurcation point, the place, the cultural movement of the evolution of our own soul and the soul of humanity is the age of transcendence. Transcending what has gone before, but including what has gone before, not excluding it, no separation. Include and transcend. Include and transcend. You sang about it, Judy. You talked about, is there something worth dying for? Oh, we know that. We have sacred longings. And these sacred longings aren't just longings to move to a new country, although it doesn't exclude that. It's not a longing to be in a loving, committed relationship, although it doesn't exclude that, with another, with the other. It excludes nothing. It includes all things, but eventually it brings us to the point of recognition where there is only one longing to be satisfied, which is the longing with the God of our being. You said it, the magnificence that is me. That's the ultimate divine sacred longing. Our awakening is guided by the listening to and moving into our sacred longings. It will bring up and herald in all parts of our being through that inner calling, that inner voice. Our longings, I think, are like markers that lead us to, as I said before, the crossroads in our life. I look at them today like the palm leaves that were placed down for Jesus to walk upon. And walk he did a week later towards his own ascension into the energy of the One. Now we can take that and we can look at our own soul's evolution. And we can say, what is the energy of the one? What is it we need to do? Where is it we need to be within ourselves, in our mind, not so much in our body? Although that's very delightful too. But to be into that sacredness, that unification of the one life. The question for me is, how can we begin to understand what lies beyond the awakening? Because the awakening is only the first step. And we think it's the ultimate step. It is not the ultimate step because it never ends, right? So here's a quick story that illustrates it for me. When Socrates was in prison awaiting his execution, he heard a fellow prisoner singing a very complex lyric. He begged the man to teach him in person. But for what reason, the other prisoner asked. So I can die knowing one thing more. There is that hunger in us. Not to know specifically, but to expand the experience of who we are and what life is. There is a hunger. It is our calling because it is our inherent beingness. Well, the spiritual life is definitely the same, and it involves a maturing of understanding, a continual unfolding, whoever we are. Awakenings are powerful, and we all come to know our ability to live in this reality will undoubtedly pass. Sometimes we're so busy trying to get it right, to reach it, to know it, to understand it, or to be that which we deeply believe we can be, that we think the awakening, we think that this point of consciousness, of mindfulness, is the enlightenment that we seek. This illumination, these moments of great and deep insight are so compelling. They're so powerful. They bring us into that unified force with ourselves and the cosmos. How could anything be greater than that? Our minds try to rationalize. There is such a feeling of freedom, of acceptance. And eventually we will realize that it is just a first step. Now I wanted to talk about this because often we keep thinking, we look outside ourselves, and because we have a deductive conscious mind that measures, we think there's somewhere to get that we're not. We do this. And hopefully, it will, on this spiritual path that we all jointly walk, serve as amusement to us. It will help to pique our curiosity about what's next. It will help us to walk in wonder and awe for life as it's showing up, because we truly know through the science of mind principles that all life is one life. It is all connected, sacred, and perfect just as it is. But can we leave it alone? No. No, we can't. You know, another little story I'm remembering comes to mind now about a child asking his father, who was a priest, where he gets his information for his sermons. And of course the priest responds, from God. And then the child says, well, how come I see you keep scratching things out then? It's like, really? There's only one, and I am that? Really? Yes, the doubt seems to creep in, doesn't it? In the Theravada tradition of the elders of Southeast Asia, they refer to the process of enlightenment, or the soul's evolution, as the Four Noble Understandings. Now, in metaphysics, the science or relationship of mind and spirit we refer to as the universal creative process, or the creative process in the individual. For we are the microcosm of the macrocosm. So let's just look at these four stages for a moment. So the first stage of this great illuminated awakening is called entering the stream, which I thought was quite interesting, since Palm Sunday is about the entering into Jerusalem. When we have our first taste of the absolute freedom of enlightenment, a freedom of the heart beyond all the changing conditions of the world, here we see through the illusion of the separate self. Here we release the identification with the body and mind and awaken into this timeless peace. Some might call it nirvana. The direction of our life seems in that moment forever changed. For we enter into a stream that will carry us to greater freedom, as inevitable as a swift flowing current carries a leaf out to the sea. Now, even though we have seen this truth and felt this truth, further purification remains for us to transform our character and embody this new understanding in our life. And this is where we begin the second stage. And the second stage of the Four Noble Understandings is called returning again. You can see the cyclical thing happening, right? Through a deep process, often requiring many, many years. In this stage, we discover and release the coarsest habits of grasping and aversion that recreate our fearful and limited sense of self. Attaining the second stage requires a continual and heartfelt attention to the suffering that comes when we cling to our desires and fears, to our ideas and our ideals. As these forces of human life are understood, they lose their hold on us, and finally, in a deep realization, the strongest forces of desire, grasping, anger, and fear significantly drop away. And we fulfill the second stage. The third stage is called non-returning. You got on the ship, it sailed. There's no going back to the former shore. In this, we are irrevocably released from any remaining desire, grasping, anger, and fear. Never more to return. To progress to this third stage, we move through a very long process of abiding in profound calm and emptiness. Is it starting to seem foreign? A very long stage of profound calm and emptiness. When wisdom grows, the subtle movements of clinging in the heart are abandoned as they arise. At this stage, we rest in the freedom and the reality of the present, and the heart's deep peace is rarely disturbed. The fourth and most extraordinary stage is called the Great Awakening, in which the last traces of subtle clinging, even to joy, even to freedom, and meditation itself, fall away. Now vestiges of pride, judgment, restlessness, and separation that veil pure being are gone, and the radiance of our true nature shines unhindered through our life. Now this map of the elders in Southeast Asia shows us, I think, that, or how a person who has experienced a deep enlightenment can still be caught in greed and anger and doubt and fear. After stream entry, a person can give genuinely inspired teachings on realization and illumination, yet still not be living them. This is not a statement I make for judgment to arise in anyone's mind. This is just a reality of the evolution. The saying, we teach what we need to learn, is very true. How do we know what to teach? How do we even know? How do we even know to speak of things that are beyond the fullness of our own embodiment? How do we know? Because there's something within us that knows, that is pulling us toward that. And in order for us to understand and embody anything, we must demonstrate it, which means we must try to step into it, to live it, to speak it, to talk it, to touch it, to share it, in order to know it, in order to be convinced. That is why always further stages of awakening are essential. When we can touch into our passion for living, as we honor our sacred longings, our deep-seated understanding of our soul's need to live in harmony with the world, I think then we're primed to move into the first stage of entering the stream. Not the second, not the third, not the fourth. The first. When I say that, I think about all the things that I've accomplished in my life. I ask you to do the same at this moment. And sometimes when we go through them, we struggle. Sometimes we don't. We look back sometimes, but not often, because we're on to the next thing. And we don't often just stay in our own recognition and gratitude for the process of the step before that has brought us here. Ultimately, we're finding there is no master, no sage, no teacher that can state the how of the process for any individual, as there is no common map for the individual whose life path is to discover themselves as one in the image and likeness of the originating cause back of all life. We never really know how far we have come, and we never really know how far we can grow. So we follow a non-linear path in this non-enlightened retirement. It is circular and continuous, in which we discover the unfoldment of our heart as we listen to our sacred longings is very artful and mysterious. Our sacred longings call us into the realm of a new sense of awareness of being and a true, simple, conscious longing to return to the One. I always remember at this time that permanence is not found, or is not true freedom. Permanence. We want to hold on to those places of enlightenment. You know, it's not about staying on the summit, right? It's not about staying on the summit. It's about constantly entering into the stream and the flow of life. But we think permanence. We think permanence in relationship. We think permanent in the stream of the flow of abundance. We think a permanence in a fabulous job we never imagined we could get. Well, something imagined it, or we never would have got it, right? Something within us knew. But we think that is freedom. Now I've arrived. It's not freedom, is it? It's the subjugation, really, to the movement and the flow of life itself. I'm going to close with a story of a disciple who is required to share his progress with his Zen master. Now, the first month, the disciple wrote, "I feel an expansion of consciousness and experience oneness with the universe." The master glanced at the note he wrote upon and he threw it away. So the second month, the student wrote, "I finally discovered that the divine is present in all things," and the master seemed very disappointed with his student. The third month, the student enthusiastically exclaimed, "Ah, the mystery of the one and the many has been revealed to my wandering gaze," and the master yawned. The fourth month, the student wrote, "No one is born, no one lives, no one dies, for the self is not." The master threw up his hands in despair. Well, a month passed, 3 months, 6 months, a year. Now, after that year had passed, the master thought it best to remind his student of his duty to maintain communication of his spiritual progress. So the disciple wrote back to him and said, "I am simply living my life. And as for spiritual practice, who cares?" When the master read this, he cried, "Thank God he finally got it." Thank God. This story reflects the teachings of the perfection of all things just as they are. No enlightenment retirement needed. It is the inevitable rising and falling, the cycles of expansion and contraction that come as we give birth to ourselves. There may be moments to push, to strive towards a spiritual goal, but more frequently the task is one of letting go, of finding a gracious heart that honors the changes of life. It has never been about finding a way to stand on the summit, but finding oneness and peace in all things. So as this age of transcendence is emerging in all of the world, it is emerging in us, in the ecosystem, in the collective psyche of humanity, in each and every moment of mindful choice, in every minute of every day. This is Palm Sunday, or Passion Sunday, as it's often called. It is the beginning of the Holy Week in the Christian tradition. A Holy Week, which within ourselves we can make adjustments needed to actualize our own sacred longings, the parts of ourself that have remained without consideration, without attention, that have been cast out by doubt, fear, and lack of faith. Our path of awakening today is held in honor and celebration and gratitude for all that has gone before and all that is in this present moment yet to be revealed by our own magnificence. God lives as us, whatever you consider God to be. And so live it as the most beautiful spirit that you are. And so it is. Thank you. Thank you.